It's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race.
For almost 2 years now, we've suffered labor pains. Work as we once knew it has vanished. Help Wanted is an unanswered call from employers whose flowing reservoir of eager low-wage workers has been swallowed by the COVID tsunami. Professionals and so-called white-collar workers have retreated to virtual home offices, and some are re-examining whether their day job is really how they want to spend the best hours of their weeks, their years, their lives. During the raging virus of 2020, frontline Black women workers were most harmed, experiencing a jobless rate more than double that of white men. Yet, they are deemed essential in today's corona crisis. More than 1 in 3 Black women are on the front line of our low-wage workforce. But as bad as the crisis seems, for Black women, it's always been horrific. Rewind to the early 1900s. More than 3 million Black women took on jobs in white people's homes, from live-in maids to days work to weekly laundry services. Domestic work was a thin thread in the fabric of survival. And then, a ground explosion, the union movement. No group would be more overrepresented in the organized labor force than Black workers, especially Black women. They reaped tremendous gains that raised wages, protected jobs, and fueled the Black middle class. But just as Black union membership peaked, private sector unions would plummet. De-unionization widened the income gap between Black and white women workers, in some sectors by as much as 30%. And here comes another enemy of economic justice in the 21st century, the gig economy. With no benefits and even less job security, an estimated 72 million workers rely on it for their major source of income, and another 80 million need it to supplement their other low-wage jobs. It's a new gilded age for workers servicing the enterprises of billionaire tech tycoons. Witness wealth disparities wider and more obscene than the greed and ruthlessness of the 19th century industrial barons. Here's the question for the post-pandemic U.S. workforce. Can we integrate the professed values of the union movement, fair wages, decent hours, and good benefits, with a vision of racial and gender equity? Some talk about a renaissance in the job force with a new generation of progressives committed to union yes. It can only happen if everyone, employers, government, the union movement, and workers confront the unabated racism that built the system that never worked. I'm Gwen McKinney for Unerased Black Women Speak.
Welcome to Unerased. My name is Carolyn Malachi, and I am your proud host. I'm joined by an incredible guest.
I'm Erica Smiley. I'm the Executive Director of Jobs with Justice.
Thank you so much for joining us. I can call you Smiley, yeah?
Yeah, please. That's what everyone's called me since I was 7, except for my parents, of course.
That name's got some hang time. That's
yeah,
cool.
I mean, I should have been a dentist. Yeah.
This episode, we're focused on labor, the pains, the opportunities, the needs. While our audience is mostly Black women, we approach the conversation through that lens. Tell us more about Jobs with Justice and how your JWJ has adapted during these unprecedented times for organized labor and workers in general.
So Jobs with Justice was founded in 1987 as a national network of community labor coalitions who could expand organizing collective bargaining power for all workers, and to really look at the need as being beyond just existing union members, but actually trying to expand far beyond it. Because already then we were experiencing as a movement severe shrinkage in union membership. All of that is still at our root, but we've evolved to see our mission as expanding organizing collective bargaining power, both in terms of traditional union membership under the NLRA or the Railway Labor Act or what have you, but also trying to look beyond that to imagine what it would mean to collectively bargain in the 21st century based on employment relationships that we have today versus what they had in 1935. And also to actually apply this tool of collective bargaining to other economic relationships, whether it's your corporate landlord, your bank holder, mortgage holder, to actually use it to win some form of an enforceable agreement. And the last thing I'll say is just like the so what of it all is that for us, building collective bargaining power is a way to expand the majority of people's voice in their economic relationships, particularly in their employment relationships. And that actually is what democracy is, the majority of people being able to participate in decision making and standard setting, in enforcement. And that can't just be a political project. That has to be something that we do in our economic lives as well, particularly the place where the majority of us spend our day, which is at work.
Yeah, Smiley, you referenced the past. And, one of the challenges facing the labor movement today, though, is the prevalence of the gig economy. It's very different. Work is very different now than it was, just a few decades ago. So how do labor rights advocates navigate between this proliferation of, gig and contract work and the demand for living wages, decent benefits, and protection of workers?
Yeah, my predecessor, Sarita Gupta, and I just recently authored a book, and we tackle this a little bit. One of the things that we began to feel and want to really articulate out there is that it's not even so much a gig economy, like it's this thing that's separate from us. It is actually a tactic that employers are using to minimize responsibility for work. I mean, that's what it is. It's just like when you think about misclassification, or historically when the fight for tipped wages as for a living wage versus a tipped wage, all of that is anchored in employers' attempts to socialize the risk of business while super privatizing the profits at the top. And so the gig economy, I prefer to call it a gig strategy. It is a gig strategy to essentially force many workers to cover their own risks, to pay for their cars, their insurance, all of that, while the company still sets the rates. And we see the same strategy in other sectors as well. It's also important because this idea of the gig economy makes it seem like people think about DoorDash and Uber and these types of things, but it's a strategy that employers can use in any sector. And we're beginning to see employers attempt it from building and construction trades to manufacturing to logistics.
Let's talk about those traditional trades. There's been a significant upsurge of job actions from workers, especially rank and file, union and in non-union shops. So can you offer some insight about what's going on? What's all the uproar about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love it. And so it's there's a couple of pieces of it, right? So the COVID-19 pandemic created an environment where it became abundantly clear what many of us have known for decades, which is that there is a section of the workforce that is essential to the running of the economy. And that unlike what we might do to other essential things, like the essential part of a house or a car, where we take very good care of them, our economy, our government, our corporate power does not take care of essential workers. And so this created a tension, a disparateness, where workers were like, okay, well, I mean, you're going to have to pay me essential pay and take care of me with essential standards if I'm going to be an essential worker. And what we're seeing is that workers act it with their feet, not unlike one of the largest worker walkouts in American history when 500,000 enslaved Black people walked off the plantation. Workers today are walking with their feet and saying, all right, well, and it's not like they're going home and just like accepting some kind of government check like the right would like us to believe. But instead of working 4 jobs, maybe they're just working 2 or 1, at a rate that's sustainable, which is ultimately what we want. This is a sign that the economy could be healthy when workers are in motion and taking these types of actions, and it's not like it's just coordinated by one institution. Then that's actually a sign that democracy is still a live fight that's worth fighting for.
I cannot think of a time when Black people have not been workers and have not been relevant. Until the world reckons with the relevance of Black people and of Black people of color and Black women and workers, there is no progress. Black workers, I say, are the canary in the coal mines. And if you think about that scenario of coal mines, canaries were sent in to determine if it was safe conditions. And if the canary died, then everyone else died. Black people are hit first with everything that comes through our society. There is this negative connotation around the notion of being a worker. But the reality is that work is valuable. We don't win until we have the ability to define the value of our labor. My name is Tanya Wallace Goburn. I'm the Executive Director of the National Black Worker Center, the network of 12 Black Worker Centers across the country.
The worker walkouts, the great resignation, a lot of that is, the image that's being created in, the public media landscape is that this is really about low wage workers. But are you seeing this 40% resignation? Is that impacting folks who are working from home, the quote unquote white collar workers that were able to transition easily from the office to our Zoom studios in our homes?
I don't know. That's a good question, Carolyn. I don't know. I mean, I can only speak anecdotally from our experience at Jobs with Justice. And anytime we've had an opening, I think the last opening we had well over 100 resumes. So we are not feeling a tightness in the same way that an institution like Rite Aid or Walmart might be when they have to, now we have to finally pay more than $15 an hour to get a worker to attract them. Oh no, I found that companies that actually are paying good benefits and good wages and fair benefits are actually doing just fine.
As they should.
As they should. As they should. That's right.
All right. So let's kind of close this conversation by talking about the notion of work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Is that really possible for a middle-income, working class, and low-wage workers? And, is work-life balance just a pipe dream?
No, it's not a pipe dream. It is a dream. It is an aspiration, and it needs to be actualized. But I don't think it's impossible or so far away. And also, I like to, as people, right? And even people who are working in some of these sectors, like people are workers, right? The sector is low wage. The worker is not low wage. So it's workers in low wage sectors. And we want to keep the responsibility on those employers. And I do think that work-life balance is possible. In fact, like part of why at Jobs with Justice we attempt to build organized and collective bargaining power, and why, like the so what of why we want to expand economic democracy, is so that people can actually live sustainable, dignified lives where they can, God forbid, have joy. Like we oftentimes in the movement, we like to just be like, yeah, and we need rights and we need all this stuff, but like the so what is actually we want to like live joyful lives. We want to be happy. We want to go to that baseball game. We want to, be able to take a vacation every now and then. And so, yes, I mean, I think it's what we're looking for is for people to have a work-life equilibrium, for them to actually receive joy from the work that they do, to know that they're making a contribution to society and to be compensated fairly for that contribution, but also to have the space to enjoy living. And the traditional adage to that is 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, 8 hours to do as you please. And whatever that balance is for any individual, like for someone like me who really loves my job, maybe it's more, but that I think it should be everyone's ability to find that balance and that equilibrium for themselves, and work life should make that possible.
The primary challenges for labor is to carry out a battle that really democratizes this country. We need to talk about a labor renaissance for the 21st century. People have resigned from work, declined to take certain kinds of jobs. And I think what organized labor needs to do is to turn that anger into organization. So it's not just individuals who are bouncing around from job to job, but where workers are actually organizing, institutionalizing their power, putting the pressure on the employer class. They're tired of being stepped on by this economy. They're tired of the ridicule. Workers are demanding justice. And that's what's really exciting right now. The demands of workers who are tired of being treated like dog mess, the demands of women who have been purged from the workforce, the demands of workers that continue to be segregated racially, ethnically. That's part of the renaissance of organized labor. My name is Bill Fletcher Jr., and I've spent most of my life in organized labor as a rank and file member of unions, as well as a staff person, including at the National AFL-CIO.
I'm wondering about the intersectionality of your work. Where does gender equity come into play? Where does race come into play?
Where does it not? How do you even separate them? I mean, you look at like both the history and the present of where we are, right? So let's just take one particular historic dynamic and talk about what it means today. So during the period of enslavement, of mass enslavement, there were several different legal courses trying to define who could be free and who could be a slave. And ultimately, one of the cases, I think it was in Virginia, determined that if your mother had been enslaved, then you would be enslaved. And what this did was create a very clear incentive for slave owners to rape Black women in order to reproduce their labor force. And so now you have a labor force that is like embedded, like and attracted to Black women in this way that is seen as immediately like yours. Just because you are of an enslaved person and a enslaved woman, you are now worth less or valued at less. We don't have to pay you. And, you see this over, like, that was a historic decision. And obviously we are not living in enslaved times today. But when you look at then the compromises that were then eventually made, the fact that domestic workers and farm workers, agricultural workers were excluded from the National Labor Relations Act during the New Deal, and those jobs were held mostly by Black women, some Irish women, but like mostly Black women. The idea of even when I was singing like my toddler some children's song, and I was singing "Working on the Railroad," and then Dinah's in the kitchen, and like Dinah is like the name that Black domestic workers were called, no matter what, kind of like Fred for Pullman porters. It's embedded in our understanding of the value of what any particular job is actually tied to the race of the person holding that job. And so again, when we think about low wage work versus low wage workers, right? Like the dominant narrative wants to attach low wage to a type of person, when in fact it's them. They could actually change. These are humans making decisions who could actually change their behavior. Or the idea of tipped wages, right? Again, this idea that recently released slaves shouldn't be paid a wage. They should be paid a tip based on how well they served us, right? And that's permeated. Meanwhile, Europe was getting rid of tipped wages. The U.S. was deeply embedding it, and we still are living with that heritage today. And so the long and short of it is that we cannot actually build a healthy democracy in this country without expanding on economic democracy in the economic arena. We cannot do any of those things without having a strategy that centralizes the fight against patriarchy and white supremacy. Like, we will just lose. It's not even just a morally just thing to do. It is the thing that will guarantee our failure or our success.
There are a whole lot of Black women out there who did not get the opportunity that I got in order to succeed. I'm a clerical worker by trade. I rose to become one of the highest ranking Black women in the labor movement. And that was because I was fortunate that I had a path that allowed me to grow. Black women's contribution has been the driving force to a strong labor movement, particularly in recent times. As one white labor leader said, if he had to pick an organizer, it would be a Black woman every time. Black women are the most likely to be organized, they're the most likely to be in the unions, and they're most likely to be the most active. My name is Patricia Ford. I'm currently working with a state federation around their social justice program, and I'm also very much involved with my church in criminal justice reform.
Take us home, Smiley, with an ideal that Black women workers across all economic strata can strive to achieve.
An ideal.
An ideal.
Well, the first thing is we should all be striving for joy. We should all be striving for lives that give us joy. That's just point blank in the period. And that there are several ways to get at that. The one that I most focus on is the economic sustainability that would allow us to do all the other things that give us joy in life. And not just a job that pays well, but a job that includes us in decision making, includes us in setting the framework, and allows us to tap into our own creativity. A job that actually gives us joy. If you really enjoy what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And I think everyone should at least have some time in their life where they have that experience. And even the most drudge-seeming job can be a dignified job if workers are able to have a voice in how it's shaped. So that's what I think we should all aspire to.
We end here with a charge from Erica Smiley, workers' rights advocate, that the key to sustainable work for Black women begins and ends with joy. So we close this episode leaving you with the music and melody of joy. Our theme song, of course, Unerased. No matter what your occupation or labor demands, here's a few minutes to embrace the sounds that you hear in celebration of your work and contributions.
It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race.
In my shoes, listen to my blues. I stand before you, resilient, stronger than power, soft as a flower. I know the hour, I am the times.
It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood,
Show
of a
me
race.
appreciation. I need to know you know who I am and what I've achieved. Honor my journey. You could learn from me. Where there's a ruse, I speak the truth. I'm looking at you with respect and appreciation. I want for you the very best in all situations. When we get together, I feel so alive. No lie. Oh, we
strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history unerased of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history unerased of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history unerased of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history unerased of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history unerased of a sisterhood, of a race.
Thanks for listening to Unerased Black Women Speak, made possible by support from the Craig Newmark Philanthropies, the Park Foundation, TD Charitable Foundation, and anonymous donors. Our theme song is Unerased by Carolyn Malachi. We had help from Joshua Levi Perrin, Alyssa Davis, Alex Kavoris, coordinating producer Stephanie Renee, and audio producer and host Carolyn Malachi. I'm Gwen McKinney, creator and executive producer, inviting you to tune in to our next episode. And while you're there, please subscribe and visit us online at unerasedbws.com.